This is CBC Here and Now.
A former police officer convicted of sexual assault is asking for his conviction to be stayed. Douglas Snellgrove was back in court today.
One of the things that we found has worked with immigration, instead of just targeting the entire world, target specific areas.
The province is looking to India as a place to find nurses. It's stepping up recruitment overseas.
I don't care who you are. When you go back to your hometown, everyone is happy. They're laughing, they're carrying on.
And in 40 minutes, moving home to pursue your passion. We'll get a sneak peek at the first episode of the new season of Land and Sea. Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. Douglas Snellgrove was back in court today. The police officer convicted of sexual assault is asking for a stay of proceedings, meaning his conviction would disappear and he'd be a free man. His lawyers and a lawyer for the Crown made submissions today at the Court of Appeal. Here and Now's Mark Quinn has our top story.
Carl Douglas Snellgrove arrived at court this morning with his wife and lawyers to make his case at the Court of Appeal in St. John's. He believes there were errors in the trial that convicted him of sexual assault a year ago. His lawyers made their case to a panel of 3 justices today. Snellgrove was first charged after driving a woman from downtown St. John's to her home in 2014. He drove her there in a police car. He was on duty and in uniform at the time. Last year, a jury found him guilty of sexually assaulting her at her apartment. The identity of the woman, known as Jane Doe, is protected by a court-ordered publication ban. Snellgrove's conviction came after his 3rd trial on the charge. He was acquitted at the first trial, a decision that sparked protests at police headquarters but was overturned on appeal. The 2nd trial was ruled a mistrial. Snellgrove was given a 4-year sentence last year, but weeks later was released on bail after the court agreed to hear his appeal. Snellgrove's lawyers are now arguing that the judge made errors answering jurors' questions. Another error, they say, Snellgrove was not present for every part of his trial. Snellgrove's lawyers are asking the Court of Appeal for a stay of proceedings because of those errors. They're arguing there's a limit on the number of times a person can be tried on the same charge. A Crown lawyer also spoke this afternoon. They're arguing there weren't errors in Snellgrove's 3rd trial. But they say if the Court of Appeal finds there was an error, a 4th trial should be ordered. The Court of Appeal has not handed down its decision yet. Mark Quinn, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, the province needs to recruit a lot of nurses to fill hundreds of vacant jobs. Today, the Premier announced he's going to set up a recruitment desk in one of the most populated countries in the world, India. Heather Gillis explains why.
The province needs to fill nearly 600 vacant registered nursing positions, and that demand can't be met locally. So Premier Andrew Ferry says he's come up with a way to recruit more.
So I'm happy to announce today that a provincial government recruitment team will travel to southwestern India.
More than 11,000 kilometers away in Bengaluru, India, reps from the province will recruit new nurses from about a dozen schools and help them immigrate to Newfoundland and Labrador. Fury says the desk will be similar to the one that helped bring Ukrainians to the province.
This desk is modeled after the recent success we had in Poland, which showed that being on the ground and making a connection with people was paramount.
Immigration Minister Jerry Burns says Bengaluru, India has a healthcare education campus. Burns says nursing programs there are taught in English and similar to ones in this province.
This is an extremely compatible fit.
Burns says an advanced team will head to India this month for 3 weeks, and it'll include representatives from his department and the College of Registered Nurses. The college will ensure the new nurses meet all requirements to get licensed to work.
They will be going to India with job offers in hand, and so the whole resettlement process with people having an income will be very, very streamlined and straightforward.
I'm really happy to be a part of it.
Rahul Garajapan is one of the people who will be recruiting. He's from India and is a registered nurse. He also studied in the same region where the province will be recruiting.
With my experience, especially the 4 years I lived here and the connections still I have there, I can certainly guide them to the appropriate place to choose the right people to come over here.
The health minister says recruiting new nurses from India will ease the pressure on the healthcare system.
We will continue recruiting until we have enough nurses working side by side with the nurses that are in the system, that they are not mandated overtime or having to work double shifts.
Immigration Minister Jerry Burns says it'll cost $40,000 to $50,000 a month to have the recruitment team in India. He says their official mission will start early in the new year. But in the meantime, politicians didn't say how many nurses they're hoping to recruit or when they'll get here on the ground, ready to work. Heather Gillis, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, the health minister is apologizing for what he calls a critical oversight. Tom Osborne called an impromptu news conference this morning responding to criticism from the privacy commissioner and the opposition for not sharing a copy of a new health care bill.
This is the first time as a minister that I've ever had to stand before the mics and say we messed up in terms of providing legislation to the privacy commissioner. But I am saying that we messed up in terms of providing the legislation to the privacy commissioner, and we have to do better.
Bill 20 collapses the province's 4 health authorities into one. The privacy commissioner slammed government for not sharing details of that bill ahead of its second reading in the House yesterday. In a letter to government, Michael Harvey calls it a violation of access to information laws and says his office should be in the know because the bill has implications for the protection of people's privacy. Harvey says the language is far too vague and the bill doesn't detail how policies will be carried out. The health minister said the privacy commissioner would be better briefed today. Well, opposition parties have criticized this week's announcement that St. Clair's Hospital in St. John's will be replaced with a new building. Yesterday, the NDP said government should focus more on recruiting and retaining healthcare workers.
Not sure where this government is going or where its head is, but for God's sake, let's do this right and work on the vision that was put forward in the Health Accord and start looking at people and start looking at what we really need rather than trying to impose a governance structure without then addressing the health care on the ground where people need it.
Well, staying with health news, the province's only standalone abortion clinic had to take drastic measures to avoid bankruptcy earlier this year. After requesting new funding and waiting for months for government to step in, the clinic threatened to close for good. The CBC's Patrick Butler has that story.
Athena Health Centre performs more than 90% of abortions in Newfoundland and Labrador. But when the pandemic put a stop to many social gatherings, the demand for abortions went down.
The fee-for-service model was based on pure numbers.
Rolanda Ryan's clinic billed MCP a flat rate per procedure. Revenue dropped about 10% in 2020, more than $80,000.
But at that exact moment when our numbers are declining, the price of supplies went through the roof. It was astounding how much everything increased. Well, a box of those blue masks, those little paper face masks, we used to buy the box of 50 for $4.99, and then it was $59.99 plus tax.
Her clinic went deep into the red, and she first wrote the provincial government to request more reliable funding in November 2020. 14 months later, the province still hadn't acted.
It was very frustrating back and forth with multiple times, the government saying, oh, we're looking at that.
Meanwhile, she maxed out a line of credit and finally gave the province an ultimatum, threatening to close the clinic if stable funding wasn't delivered soon.
I was heartbroken.
The health department approved the new block funding model last spring, and the money eventually arrived in July. Health Minister Tom Osborne says making new funding decisions can take time and that health officials were often busy dealing with COVID-19 issues. But he admits the wait was too long.
But it was an extraordinary length of time, and that is very unfortunate.
Patrick Butler, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, the Transportation and Safety Board is sending a team of investigators to investigate yesterday's ferry collision. Both Bell Island ferries are back in service today following this incident yesterday in which one of the boats struck the other near the dock in Portugal Cove. The Beaumont Hamel and the Legionnaire were docked for part of the day while officials from the Department of Transportation assessed the ships.
Well, the temperatures this morning were cool. In fact, we saw the first frost, or first freeze, I should say, through central. Even in St. John's, as those temperatures were hovering around the 0 degree mark or even below 0 through central. Same thing up across Labrador, where your temperatures were sitting between 3 and 4 degrees below 0. Now, temperatures really didn't move much today across the island. If you take a look at the daytime high, somewhere between 2 and 7 degrees, warmest along the south coast. And then temperatures across Labrador not moving much either. -3 was the daytime high in Lab City. Now take a look at the temperature difference. That is 8 degrees cooler today than it was yesterday in St. John's. And then as we head towards the west and then up across Labrador, those numbers still cooler, but they're on the rise. And taking a look at what's happening right now in Labrador, Wabush reporting some flurries. Those will continue, but temperatures rise as we get into tomorrow. I will get into the full forecast coming up.
Well, a tragic update for you now on that missing berry picker on the Avalon. Police say the body of Brent Warren was found yesterday evening. A search and rescue team, along with police officers and a police dog, had been searching for Warren in the Fairhaven area. The 58-year-old from Chapel Arm left his home to go berry picking early Tuesday but didn't return. His vehicle had been found along the Trans-Canada Highway. Well, the provincial government has formally apologized to people who were abused in government-run youth facilities in the 70s and 80s. More than 70 people say they were abused at training schools in Whitburn and Pleasantville and St. John's. Their lawsuit was settled this year when government paid out $12.5 million in compensation. Well, today, the Justice Minister, John Hogan, delivered an apology in the legislature.
Class members trusted those who were taking care of them at these institutions, and that trust was broken. Not just with the young people who were staying at the facilities, but with their families and communities. For those individuals who were mistreated, as well as their families and supporters, I, as Attorney General, and on behalf of the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador and the people of the province, want to acknowledge the harms that these young people suffered while they were in custody. These abuses should not have happened, and no young person should have had to endure what these people endured. For this, I offer a sincere and profound apology.
Hogan also says it took courage for those who were abused to come forward and tell their story. Well, in other news, the province and Nape have signed collective agreements for 20,000 public service workers, and it doesn't come cheap. The deal gives each of the 20,000 workers a $2,000 signing bonus. That's a total payout of $40 million, plus a 2% wage increase each year over 4 years. There are also increases for protective clothing and uniform allowances, and there will be a review of the telework arrangements within government departments and regional authorities. Since the start of the year, the government says it has signed deals with 5 other unions. Negotiations are continuing with the others. Results from the latest call for bids for exploration rights in this province's offshore are in, and they prove once again that Exxon Mobil remains a dominant player in this crucial but increasingly divisive industry. But as Terry Roberts reports, there are more signs that Equinor and its partner are serious about developing Bay du Nord.
Oil giant Exxon Mobil leads the way when it comes to production in this province's offshore. Lead operator for the platform that started it all, Hibernia. And since 2017, Hebron. Now there's a sign the company wants in on more of the action, teaming up with a newcomer, Qatar Energy, committing to spend more than $180 million on a prospect in the Orphan Basin called Heart's Content, located in deep water, well outside Canada's 200-mile limit.
I think it's very encouraging. I think it's good news.
An area thought to contain large quantities of oil and gas.
In that license, we have a real classic structure, one of the top 10 that we have. It is a multi-billion barrel potential, and also in that area we have the propensity for natural gas development as well.
Seeing players like Exxon, who have been backbones here, continuing to think that there's a future here, I thought overall I was impressed and I was quite happy.
Exxon Mobil has up to 6 years to make good on its commitment, and in a statement sent a strong signal that it plans to do just that, saying, "This new opportunity builds on our 25 years of success as lead owner of Hibernia and more recently as operator of the Hebron project. We look forward to exploring this new area with our co-venturer, Qatar Energy." Results from the latest bid round were released on Wednesday, with 5 parcels gobbled up, with total spending commitments of $238 million, with Equinor and BP Canada obtaining 3 parcels in the area of their massive oil finds at Bay du Nord.
Some of the most important companies in our offshore have really re-established their position.
Equinor has said a final investment decision on Bay du Nord could happen in the next few years, with first oil by the end of this decade.
They're going to be there for many decades.
BP Canada also acquired 100% ownership of a single license in the Orphan Basin that borders a parcel on which it plans to carry out exploration activities next year.
Generally, I think it's a positive sign.
All this at a time when calls are growing louder for an end to fossil fuels and the emissions they create. But supporters say there is a strong demand for petroleum products, and Newfoundland and Labrador has the right balance at the right time.
I think that we have a responsibility to provide a commodity that we think has better standards and better quality.
Everyone seems to agree that while markets are hot, the oil industry will not last forever. The question now is whether oil companies like Equinor will develop projects like Bay du Nord in time to take advantage of this in-demand commodity. Terry Roberts, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, the cost of gas and most other fuels is down across the province this morning. The Public Utilities Board lowered the price of gasoline by 2.6 cents a litre. That puts the maximum price of self-serve unleaded at $1.90 a litre on the Avalon Peninsula. Diesel dropped by 4 cents a litre. The price of furnace oil is also down nearly 4 cents, while stove oil saw an increase of 6 cents on the island, but down nearly 7 cents in Labrador. Propane saw the smallest decrease, about a half cent a litre. For the second time this year, the food bank at Corpus Christi Church in St. John's has been hit by a thief. Sometime last weekend, someone broke through a window in a garage and stole a freezer's worth of meats, along with a case of margarine. Even snow tires were taken. It's the latest blow during a difficult year for the food bank.
Monday morning at approximately 8:45, I came to the food bank to open up for the morning. And when I opened the door, all I saw was glass and cardboard all over the porch. Somebody had entered a shed that's adjoining and broke a window and got in through there. When I entered the building, I noticed that our freezer had been cleaned out. Anybody can come here and get food for free. And just to come and somebody to come and break in and take it all, it's pretty devastating. So we try to buy when things are on special and stock our freezers and with things that we need. And we don't have a big surplus of monies now because our church is sold, and we used to get monetary donations from the church every month. So, you know, we're trying to operate on the few funds we have here. The building was maintained by us. It was built on church property, of course, and we could stay here as long as St. Vincent de Paul was operating. But now that the church is sold, it is built on church property, so we're anticipating that we have to move at some point. We're not sure yet when, but we are in the process of looking for other accommodations. And rents are high, and we really can't afford to pay high rents for a building. So we're really not sure what we're going to do. We prepare for Christmas around this time and get registration and everything, you know, for the Christmas hampers. But we really don't know when we can do that this year. So everything is kind of up in the air.
Staying on the topic of food banks, we heard last week that the Memorial University Food Bank has had to close until it could restock because it's seeing double the clients than before. And across Canada, a new report found that food bank use is up because of rising costs and inflation. So we wanted to check in on a food bank in Western Labrador, a mining region that's been booming, to see how things are going there.
Food Banks Canada and other food banks have been in the news a lot lately, and it seems like the arrow is going up, almost straight up in some cases. I find that here, through COVID and that we didn't lose our main source of income here, so that meant that the industry stayed working. So far, we're seeing usually a fairly regular customer base, a client base, if you will. No doubt the inflation that's upon us now may affect that in terms of perhaps not just numbers, but maybe the types and the demography of the people who are coming. We get new clients all the time, but it's pretty regular, pretty steady here. Well, the Christmas hamper line is up now, and it will be until December the 1st. And the Christmas hamper program has been ongoing for quite some time now, and that is a scenario where we go away from our regular foodstuffs that you have in the regular time of the food bank, and that's going to be, a selection of fresh fruits and vegetables and meats and so on. The generosity of the region has been very supportive and allows us to carry a fairly wide range of items in our foods pantries.
Fish is not on the menu in any of the other schools in which we operate, nor to my knowledge is it on menus in any other schools in the province.
Anthony Padden Elementary School in Musgrave Town had a very special lunch served to them.
Show them how we catch the fish, show them how their lunch was packed.
Students were asking for seconds. I couldn't believe that.
Really good. Good. Great.
I'm Jeremy Eaton, and I'll have that story coming up on Here and Now.
Well, if you're wondering if these cool temperatures are going to stick around, just take a look at the 5-day forecast. I think that tells you everything you need to know. We'll get into the details coming up.
Time for a look at the weather. And Ashley, yesterday you were talking about the grapple that was on the way, and I was out for a hike this morning in the woods and got a nice look at that grapple coming down. Just have a look at this. You can see it very distinctly on the leaves.
Yeah, and people often mistaken this with hail because it sounds like hail as it's falling, but the difference is if you do take one of those snow pellets, or also called snow pellets, in your hand, if you can squish it, that is grapple, and if you can't, it's hail. But typically hail really only happens during thunderstorms.
Interesting.
That has to do with the updrafts and the downdrafts of everything. But yeah, we're definitely in grapple season now.
Yes.
It's not going to stick around for long, though. That's the good news.
Yeah,
but,
I saw before the break the temperatures look amazing.
Yep. Certainly do. It's going to go back into spring, feeling more like spring. And you can see some of those temperatures there for the highs over Ontario and Quebec and even parts of the Maritime provinces into the teens. And that is what is headed our way over the next couple of days. But daytime highs today only between 2 and 4 degrees for the most part. Lab City, you were the coldest at about -3. If we take a look at what's going on, we've got an area of low pressure far to the west, but we've got a warm front, and that is the difference between the colder air to the north and the warmer air to the south. So that's what's going to track across the province as we head through the overnight tonight. And just taking a look at the current temperatures, you can already start to see some of that air edging further north as well. So even though your temperature is hovering around -3 right now in Lab City, temperatures are actually going to warm up as we get into the morning hours. You'll actually hover around 5 degrees by the time you get to the morning, and we'll see those temperatures warm up as well across a good chunk of the island. You can already see some of that warmer air along the south coast, 4 and 5 degrees, but again, these 7 to 9 degree temperatures are going to move in right along with it. Taking a look at the winds right now, it's been fairly gusty. It was definitely gusty overnight last night, and current sustained winds are around 57 kilometers per hour right now in Nape, and about 26 kilometers per hour in Corner Brook. Factor in those wind gusts. Those winds are gusting nearly 70 kilometers per hour for you in Nape. And we're seeing some gusts across the island, somewhere between 40 and 60 kilometers per hour. Now, as we head through the night tonight, those winds will eventually ease. Certainly as we get into tomorrow afternoon, we'll only be seeing those gusts between 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. And depending on where you are, those winds will either be out of the southwest or west, and then even up across Labrador, they'll be out of the south as well, with that warmer air moving in with it. Now, winds will pick back up, though, as we head into Saturday. Those winds, widespread areas, gusting between 40 to 60 kilometers per hour. We may even see those gusts through central, along the northeast coast, northern peninsula, between 60 and 70 kilometers per hour. So a bit of a windy Saturday on the way. Taking a look at what's going on right now as far as satellite radar goes, nothing really. We do have some snow, though, up across Labrador, and then some cloud cover making its way towards the northern peninsula. But overall, as far as snowfall totals go, we may see a couple more centimeters, likely less than 2, though, for those of you in Labrador before that changes over to rain. And then again along the Long Range Mountains, higher elevations may pick up a couple more centimeters as we head through the evening hours tonight. As far as the future tracker goes, we'll just time that out for you. There it is, that snow moving in and then towards the Long Range Mountains there along the west coast. Other than that, just some cloud cover the story tonight. We may see a few showers or flurries lingering into the morning, and that's because those temperatures are going to climb up as we get into the morning. So temperatures tonight, there's that 5 degrees I was talking about in Lab City. Otherwise, we'll stay below 0 for a good chunk of the Big Land, well below 0, in fact, between -4 and -7. And then for the island, generally between 0 and 4 degrees overnight tonight, again with that chance of showers or flurries for the most part. Those winds will stay a bit brisk out of the northwest between 30 to 50 kilometers per hour. Now, as far as the weather goes for tomorrow, we'll see that chance of showers and or flurries in the morning that will eventually taper off, and then some showers possible for Labrador. Basically, that's the story for you through the day tomorrow. Really not a whole lot to talk about other than that, especially across the island as we see those temperatures back up again around 11 or 12 degrees for your afternoon. Winds will be out of the west between 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. Similar story as you head towards central, south coast, and maybe towards the northeast coast, a bit cooler than that, just because you're closer to the water. But overall, between 10 to 12 or 13 for the west coast. Same thing for parts of the northern peninsula. However, your temperatures will likely stay in the single digits the further north you go, and then towards southeastern Labrador as well, about 5 degrees. Sunshine, so it will feel nice, and the winds will ease as well tomorrow. Otherwise, you're sitting around 8 degrees for central and western Labrador. Breezy for you again with those showers moving in. These warm temperatures are going to stick around, as you can see as those long-range forecasts. I'll get into those details when I come back.
Thanks, Ashley. Well, Memorial University needed penalty kicks, but the women's soccer team defeated defending champions Acadia University at the Atlantic University Sport Tournament in Wolfville. What a way to end the season. Goalkeeper Sydney Walsh made 17 saves and was named the player of the game. The win means the Seahawks move on to the semifinals. They're playing the Dalhousie Tigers right now. So best of luck to our home team. Well, still ahead on Here and Now tonight, we'll speak with Jane Adey, the host of Land and Sea, about the show's upcoming first episode and what's in store for the coming season. And we'll have details on the federal government's economic outlook released this afternoon in Ottawa. But first, the provincial opposition isn't giving up on getting the Premier to table the receipts for his controversial vacation in Labrador. The Progressive Conservatives have started question period each day this week by asking the Premier for those documents. Here's today's exchange.
The Premier is continuing to use deflection techniques from his fishing trip with billionaire John Risley. All the Premier has to do is finally be transparent with the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. So I asked the Premier, will you table your receipts?
The Honourable, the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've said many times in this House and will continue to say, I always followed the rules. I'll continue to follow the rules. In fact, in this case, I set up extra rules in terms of an ethical wall, which is no obligation by this legislature, but I took the extra step to ensure that that is in place, and I have done so with other friends, other colleagues, and I ensure that I encourage other members of the House to do the same should they find themselves in a conflict.
The Honourable, the Opposition House Leader.
Thank you very much, Speaker. All I can say is that's astounding. Speaker, will the Premier give this House the full guest list of this trip to the fishing lodge? Who else was with you and Mr. Risley, Premier?
The Honourable Minister of Industry, Energy and Technology.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess what I'm trying to wonder at this point is that we're asking questions about a vacation that the Premier took, because that, for any Premier, is not an issue. The issue will become is, did it have an effect, or were there some ill-begotten gains given to somebody? In this particular case, the question is being asked about the win process in this province. So it's not often that somebody in government asks a question, but my question to any member or anybody outside this House, and I'll say it here and I'll say it outside, is anybody saying right now that anybody was given something as it relates to this process that somebody else was not given? Because my assertion here and outside is that this is a completely fair process, and I would look forward to another opportunity to answer this question. Thank you.
The Honourable, the Opposition House Leader.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I say to the response, it's optics, premature and 65 days a year. It's judgment, and bottom line, Mr. Speaker, just the people's house, and the people would like to know the answer to that question about the receipts.
The member mentioned optics, but what I am concerned with, and what every Newfoundlander and Labradorian should be concerned with, is reality. And the reality is, was there anything given to somebody? Was there an advantage or favor given to anybody, whether they're a friend of the Premier or anybody else? And the reality is, and the answer is, no, unequivocally.
Well, still with the legislature today, one of the last Second World War veterans in this province was honored with a standing ovation in the House of Assembly.
It is a great honour to welcome Chief Petty Officer Rod Dion and his daughter Jen Dion, who is joining us for a member statement.
For his many years of Legion service, CPO Dion is now a life member and has also received the Minister of Veterans Affairs commemoration for his ongoing commitment to his comrades and remembrance. 2022 marks CPO Dion's 54th year of participation in the Royal Canadian Legion annual Poppy campaign. Absolutely amazing. Each year I've had the pleasure of seeing photos and hearing many stories that he loves to share with all those that receive their poppy from this true hero. Speaker, I'm honored to stand today and thank Mr. Dion for sharing his stories year after year, ensuring the memories of those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice are always remembered. He is truly better than the best. Thank you.
Well, every driver hits the occasional detour, but this one was a surprise for a woman in Ontario. A rental agency told her she was too old to get behind the wheel, at least in their vehicles. CBC's Angelina King has that story.
Elizabeth Schlarb and her adult foster sons with special needs have a busy schedule that has Schlarb driving a lot. Taking them to activities, running errands, and driving across Ontario to visit family. Schlarb is 84 and very comfortable behind the wheel.
I don't have any speeding tickets. I don't have any accident tickets.
But when she went to pick up a minivan she booked to drive a large group to visit family out east, she was told she was too old to drive it.
I was offended. Don't judge people by their age.
The rental company, Green Motion, has a policy that bars drivers over 80.
I have never run across this problem before.
Graham Webb practices elder law and says Green Motion's rule could be a human rights violation unless the company can prove it can't get insurance for customers over 80. No major car rental company in Canada appears to set maximum age limits on drivers.
The Ontario Human Rights Code really prohibits discrimination in the provision of goods and services based on age.
Bill Van Gorder is with CARP, an advocacy group for older Canadians.
It's profiling to a large degree, just assuming by looking at somebody that they can't do something.
In a statement, Green Motion International said age restrictions are often in place because of insurance demands. It also said it allows franchise owners to change the age rule to ensure it meets local legislation. The owner of the airport location where Schlarb was denied didn't specifically address the age rule, but said the branch reviews and updates policy regularly and is always looking to make improvements. Schlarb says she wants Green Motion to know she did make it to see family in New Brunswick by splitting up the group and driving her own car instead.
I wish I could have gone back afterwards and said that I did drive the 1,300 kilometers all the way there and all the way back.
Still, she calls her would-be rental experience offensive.
I hope it'll never happen to anybody else.
Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
I don't care who you are. When you go back to your hometown, everyone is happy.
Moving back home and pursuing your passion. Land and Sea is launching its newest season this weekend on CBC television, the 58th season of Land and Sea. And joining me now is the new host, Jane 80. So Jane, can you tell us what we can expect in the first episode?
Well, Carolyn, the first show is a piece we've called Reclaiming Happiness, and it's about Jonathan and Liz White. Family, they lived in St. John's and they were tired of the city life and the stress of city life. So they decided that they wanted to move back to rural Newfoundland. They're both from rural communities. And the way that they did that was through artwork. Jonathan was a nurse and had a stressful job working offshore, but he started to toy with reclaimed wood and make pieces out of that. So they started selling that and then discovered that they could actually make a living from this artwork. So they moved to Twillingate. So the story is all about them reclaiming their happiness in a rural community and getting away from city life. Here's a clip from Jonathan White.
Well, getting back to this life stuff, is quite complicated. A lot of people go to work and they're miserable, and they come home and they can't wait for the weekends. And the way I looked at it is so we go home and you're like, I don't care who you are. When you go back to your hometown, everyone is happy. They're laughing, they're carrying on, they're joking or whatever. And when that Sunday comes and you want to get back to St. John's before dark, they'd rather be shot for the most part. And that's the kind of way, so why are we getting in our truck with our kids now and driving all the way back to St. John's to be miserable? I mean, we only got one life to live. So it's like, why can't we just live where we're happy all the time? And for some people, that's not possible. And, you got to do what you got to do. But for me and my wife, absolutely possible. So we made it happen.
Well, it sounds like a wonderful lifestyle change. And Jane, what else can we expect to see over the course of the season?
Well, it's been a really busy season for us. We're starting a little later than normal, but we have lots of shows ready for people to view. Our second show, we're going to take people to Port Rexton and meet Nancy Churchill. She lives in Port Rexton on a farm raising all kinds of animals, and she's doing it off-grid, so without electricity. So we really explore why, she wanted to choose this pretty challenging lifestyle and learn a little bit about how she's piecing together a living and a life there. Another show, we're going to take people all the way from Lassie to Middle Arm, out to Westport, then to Kings Point, Springdale, talking about whale bones. The province has 2 whale pavilions right now, but there are actually whale skeletons sitting in sheds and warehouses all over White Bay and Green Bay. And those communities are hoping to showcase those whales in pavilions in the future. So that's another program. We've also done something on icebergs and climate change, so people should look forward to that one. A really interesting piece we did was back in September. We got on board the Amundsen research vessel, Coast Guard vessel, and we went right up the coast of Labrador. And we also had an opportunity to stop in Hebron and learn about the history of the community there. Also saw my first polar bear, which was really exciting. Oh, wow. But that will, there will be 2 pieces about that particular trip. So that'll be coming later in the season. We're continuing to shoot right now, actually. So later on this month, I'm going to be heading to Conn River and Gillams for a story about crafts at risk. So that's just a taste of what's to come, but lots of color and lots of interesting characters as always on Land and Sea.
Yeah, you have been very busy for sure. And when can people watch it?
So the first show airs on Sunday, 11:30 in Newfoundland, 11 o'clock in Labrador.
Jane 80, looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks very much.
Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland has delivered her much-anticipated fall economic statement. Faced with stiff inflation, she says the government has struck a balance between targeted spending to help the most vulnerable and keeping a check on the deficit. The CBC's David Thurton reports.
Chrystia Freeland has this message for Canadians. The economy will likely get worse before it gets better.
We talk a lot about how this is a time of economic uncertainty. What that really means is no one knows for sure what's going to happen.
The finance minister says we are facing the real risk of a recession. 2 scenarios are in play, a soft landing and a hard landing. The baseline scenario shows GDP slowing to 0.7% and a jobless rate of 6.1%. Or the downside scenario, GDP shrinks to 0.9% and a jobless rate of 6.6%.
What we're announcing today, what we've been doing throughout, is to strike a balance between necessary compassion and support for Canadians and fiscal responsibility.
To help Canadians cope, the government is proposing new targeted measures. The Canada Workers' Benefit will now be delivered quarterly to 4.2 million Canadians, rather than just at tax time. The interest on federal student and apprenticeship loans will be permanently eliminated, and the feds will also negotiate credit card fees with the finance industry. And if the banks don't play ball, they'll legislate those fees lower. It all means the government is adding $6.1 billion in new spending this fiscal year. Freeland believes this won't accelerate inflation, which this former parliamentary budget officer agrees with.
It's hard to make the case that even in this high inflationary environment, that small amount of money and the way it's targeted would be create problems for our challenge to reduce the inflation rate.
Despite the billions in new spending, there's one bright spot for fiscal hawks. The government is projecting a lower deficit, $36 billion instead of $52 billion. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Still in the capital, more organizers of the convoy protest in Ottawa last winter are testifying at the inquiry into the federal government's use of the Emergencies Act. Benjamin Dichter was an early spokesperson for the protesters. Today, he told the inquiry there were several factions within the protest and that government and police officials didn't seem to know who they should be dealing with.
We have Keith Wilson and Randy Hillier's buddy, Tom Marazzo, and Doug Ford's buddy, Dean French, setting up meetings with people in the city, pretending to be negotiating some sort of deal. And what was shocking is nobody in the Ottawa Police, in the mayor's office, in the city council, did the most basic due diligence to see if these people possessed the position of moral persuasion that they could speak on our behalf.
Dichter eventually helped set up a cryptocurrency fundraiser for the convoy. A report that examined funding for the protest was presented to the inquiry today. It showed $24 million had been donated. It spelled out where the money came from and how it was distributed. Tomorrow on CBC Radio's Newfoundland Morning, insurance questions after Fiona. One homeowner in Port aux Basques says she still has to pay monthly premiums even though the house has been condemned and will be demolished.
Well, we're looking ahead to the weekend forecast, and it looks fairly warm for most areas. It will be a bit unsettled, though, up across the Big Land as we see some showers work their way in tomorrow and then continue through the day on Saturday. We may even see some snow for the northernmost portions of Labrador as we head into the afternoon hours as well. Now, winds will be a bit breezy, at least to start for a good chunk of the province as well. We may see a few showers for the northern peninsula, but overall, Saturday's fairly quiet, and those temperatures are going to be warm as well. We should sit into the low to mid-teens through the day, so anywhere from 13 to 16 degrees. 16 may be a bit over what we see, but at this point it's likely. Northern Peninsula, you'll get back into the double digits as well, between 11 and 12 degrees, and then double digits the story for Labrador, particularly central and coastal areas, the west and north. You're still looking at those temperatures into the single digits. Just barely, though, about 2 or 3 degrees for your Saturday. Into Saturday evening and Sunday morning, another area of low pressure moves in. Now, this one looks a bit more messy for portions of Labrador. This pink here is the potential for some ice pellets and maybe even some freezing rain for your Sunday. It won't last long, but it'll head towards the coast. So you'll see some flurries to start, likely get into some of that mixed precipitation into the afternoon on Sunday, and then rain in behind that as we see another warm up, or at least temperatures much warmer than they have been. Now, the temperatures will start mild for Happy Valley Goose Bay, but you'll hover around 5 degrees by the time you get into the afternoon. And then again, teens the story for a good chunk of the island, except in the east where those temperatures will hover in the single digits. But that doesn't last long. We get back into the teens as we head into Monday and Tuesday, although at this point Tuesday looking a bit rainy, and those overnight lows starting to dip again. So we will see that cool down. Now that cool down is going to come much quicker on Tuesday for both central and western Newfoundland, as you see between 3 and 6 degrees overnight lows again, starting to get fairly chilly between 1 and 2 degrees, maybe even 0 for central Newfoundland. And then for eastern Labrador, you're looking at your temperatures between 3 and 7 degrees, and then back into that potential for some snow again for western Labrador by the time we get into midweek next week. Now take a look at this shot. I love when the sky is this color.
Wow.
Looks like earlier tonight the sky was that here as well, but this is the sunset in Mitchell's Brook on the southern Avalon. Keith shared this great shot with us, and if you have any weather photos that you would like to share with us, you can send them to many areas. You can send them to my Facebook page, Twitter, or email them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
Oh, that is gorgeous. And yeah, we did notice the sun setting earlier. Heather Gillis, when she was doing her stand-up, there was a beautiful light behind her there tonight. So Saturday, my goodness, is definitely a day to plan some outdoor activities. And if you're going to be out, maybe people can send us some pictures of what you're doing on Saturday.
Yeah, and clean up what's left to fall from those leaves. I know my backyard was full of maple leaves. They're all gone now, though. That's good.
I have these chestnuts too that make a real mess. They're not like chestnuts, they're some kind of nut.
Yeah, not fun, but that's okay.
That's it for us. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
Good night.